Yeah. So, well, cool, man. It's great to meet you. And I want to begin our interview with surviving the last 3.5 years, getting through the pandemic. How did
Oh
you
yeah,
get through it, and how did it change you?
Shakespeare. Shakespeare. Well, it did an extraordinary amount of well, it sort of it damaged my ability to cope, I think, with reality. It's important for me to be Shakespeare, to be around other people and to have conversations as a writer and I think as a person just like anybody else. I rely on that so much. And I it really Shakespeare before I moved to Vancouver where there's people, I was living in the middle Shakespeare in the middle of nowhere. I was married, and I wasn't able to drive, or at least I thought I wasn't. And it was because Tourette's Shakespeare because I have Tourette's syndrome. Um, the problem is that uh, there are growing pains with illness, Shakespeare, with something that you're going to have for the rest of your life, Shakespeare. And so there are times when you don't really understand what you're capable of, or what you're not capable of, and so you have to figure that out over time, Shakespeare, and hope that the people around you are patient enough uh, to do that with you. Um, and then, Sh Shakespeare, just after the pandemic in that year, 2021, in October, I just celebrated my Shakespeare, my 32nd birthday the month before, not even a month before, and I quit my Shakespeare. I quit my job. I was working at Starbucks, and
Yeah.
I was working at Starbucks, like even the drive-through. Anyway, extraordinary. So uh, Shakespeare. For about a month, I waited for to hear back from the people that uh, help people like me find work.
Sure.
Because given my the criteria, my workplace would have to be very accommodating in many ways, Shakespeare. And so they called me on October 16th, 2021, and they said, "We can't find you anything. There's nothing you can do. So if maybe like maybe you should write because you do that and you love that." And I'm an award-winning journalist and a photographer, and I Shakespeare. I taught myself. I think like probably a lot of jazz musicians have to do because
Yeah.
they're the masters are so they're all over the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, and teachers are expensive. Yeah, oftentimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Too. I know my friend yeah. I know my friend. Yeah, he's a robber baron. I'm just joking. He's wonderful. He's very good at what he does. He's very good.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so I I started writing my book about 10 minutes later after that phone call.
Right on.
And I wrote a book and it's doing quite well. I mean, I think it's a modest success in terms of like in the grand scheme of things, but in terms of the feedback Shakespeare I've gotten, it's outrageous and Shakespeare extraordinary and very flattering. Um mm, yeah, Shakespeare. Yeah.
Right on. So,
Mm,
is that your primary vocation these days, is writing?
Shakespeare. Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Mm, Shakespeare.
So
Mm.
when you were younger, did you always dream of being a journalist and taking photos and writing? Was that kind of in the orb for you?
I actually had not really Shakespeare. I admire journalists, right? Shakespeare. I am I because I've now done the job a little bit, but I've never really been interested so much, really. I'm marshaling facts, Shakespeare, and evidence, and sort of. I'm not really. I wasn't really into that, and also, but I wanted to get paid for writing, and
Yeah.
so I auditioned to get a job at a newspaper, and I got the job. Shakespeare, because anyway, um, and so for me it was, but writing though, Shakespeare, uh, I love words, so much, um, and so I think a lot of jazz musicians can relate to
Oh yeah.
that. Like they're just like they worship certain things, and because you cannot like summon that kind of affection for music like that without there being a sincere and earnest love for like understanding why that music was written and why it's played that way.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much introspection that the artist is doing that you need to like that you need to um hmm. No, I want to say accommodate, but that's not the right word. Anyway, so being a journalist wasn't like really my interest. I thought about being a writer because I fell in love with the music of words and language because that's what it is music,
Yeah.
Shakespeare. Um, yeah, and now I get to do that. Shakespeare, and
So, who's been kind of a hero for you in your life, an inspiration? I mean, you obviously have varied interests, and
mm,
you're doing well in writing. Who's been an inspiration?
alive.
Yeah, well, I guess anybody that's
Hmm.
here or not here that's been an inspiration.
Hmm. Oh, okay. Hmm. Well, I started uh studying at first. There's Robert Owen Butler. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1993. I started Shakespeare. I started writing letters to him, and then he eventually started writing me back, and then we had correspondence. Anyway, he's a very lovely man. Um, and let's see. Um, After that, I studied Hemingway because, in my view, it's important to know how to be lean as a writer. It's more important to know like what to cut rather than what to put in. If like in the end, it depends on what stage you're at, but in the end, that's very important.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. And then, but in r reality, the most influential person, like writer, is going to be Charles Dickens by the Texas Mile because Shakespeare, his work is extraordinary. It's not as brilliant as Shakespeare's because Shakespeare's is like I mean, he really is the best of English literature that exists. And so Charles Dickens, but Charles Dickens is more relatable
Yeah.
and he's much more beautiful in his work as a storyteller. Um, and I really appreciate the British. There's a British like they say like if you you only use one word when you could have used 10, you're just being lazy. But there's a way to be actually it's rather efficient, but each word is profoundly important. No, and relevant to like what you're saying. It's really Charles Dickens for sure.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. Of all of the journalistic endeavors you've had, if you could have a dream interview, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Oh man. Um, let's see. Like my first instinct is to say Marie Curie. Uh, just because like how often there's only one person that's won a Pulitzer Prize or a Nobel Prize in two different fields of science. Um, but if I could interview anybody, hmm, I honestly, I think I would have to say someone like Alexander the Great.
Yeah,
That would be really weird. I don't know why. I just feel like I don't know, something enigmatic about his whole situation.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
No,
know
I get
why.
it.
Yeah.
I get it for sure. So let me ask you this. What's been kind of the motivation for you in your endeavors with writing and taking photos and all that? What gets you up every day? What motivates you to be who you are and to evolve?
Um, hmm. It's really the work. I know that sounds silly, but I know it won't to the people that listen to the show, I'm sure, because I they know what it's like to love some yeah, yeah. I know what it's like to love something so much. Um that it distorts like it warps your ability to like socialize and like be a part of because it's really and also it reminds me of something John Steinbeck said, which is his philosophy. He said, "My whole mission as a writer is to help people understand one another," and I share in that. So if it's anything, I am like that Francisco Goya painting from there's this it's called the Black Painting. The Black Paintings is a series. And he did about the, I think it's about the Peninsula Wars, and one of them is a dog that is, it's called the dog, and it's just a dog, and it's staring up at something, and it's very clear that it's cowering, but it's looking at something. You don't know what it is. The painting just ends. It's a hill, and it just ends, and you don't know what they're looking at. It's so it has a very profound effect. It really is wonderful. And it describes, I think, part like how I feel like we are facing oblivion in so many senses, and we need to understand one another now.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
So let me ask you this. Um, of all of the things that you've done so far, what are you the proudest of? What's the thing that you're the proudest of?
I am proudest. Um, I get a lot of letters from people that have read my work. Um, and my two favorite ones are they said I used to not like reading because I wasn't very good at it. But now I read your book and now I love reading. And someone else told me that even if I did nothing for the rest of my life, that I've made my time on Earth worthwhile. And so that's my that's what I'm most proud of, is having that effect, is being able to achieve those two things.
Right on. So you're a Navy veteran too, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've
For
got
sure.
quite a history of
Yeah,
things.
resume.
So how many of these things come into the book? How many is it autobiographical? How much of this comes into your book?
Shakespeare. Oh man. Oh, so much of what I've done in my life informs my work. So much. For example, like a lot of there's some naval stuff that I'm familiar with, like how things at work on a battleship when, general quarters is called and everyone is running to battle stations. Um, yeah, and so much of like human anatomy, because I was a corpsman at Shakespeare, which is a medic, for the people that don't know. Navy medics are corpsmen are the ones that are deployed with Marines, like to wherever. They don't Marines don't have their own medics. They get them from the Navy. In fact, the Marines are actually a department of the Navy. Most people don't know that. And also, the Navy was the first U.S. military branch. And the last thing, corpsman was the very first job ever to
Wow.
exist in the U.S. military. The first job ever was a Navy corpsman.
Wow.
Anyway,
Cool. That's
very cool,
cool.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, that's why there's a you have a rating that they give you a number that helps you identify like what your job is. So you're like, oh, I was a 0604, and that's whatever. Corpsman is quad is 0000. That's like,
Oh wow. Yeah,
that's
that's
quite funny.
wild.
Well,
Yeah.
anyway, so time in the Navy, like there was and all of basically everything I've done. There's and so much that I've learned from other people, and also because of the way I grew up, I understand Shakespeare. I understand suffering. I it, it's really it helped me to connect and to justify truly like the things I was saying, because I know them. I know them to be true because they are of me, and I pay attention to what people say, and I very closely. I don't think people realize closely because it also there's so much that people describe about themselves by the way they speak, and in the words they use, because people don't say things they don't mean generally. They just don't, and so human study is also was a large part of it, that I've many years of doing that, from growing up in an abusive house. You like it's imperative that you learn how faces and what expressions mean, and the cadence of a walk, and I don't know, there's just so many things you learn to be very sensitive to, and that ends up being a very helpful very helpful strategy to learn how people really truly are. Because you have to pay attention, and yeah, you have to be very vigilant. Yeah. Mm. Storytelling, that's what it's all, that's largely what it is.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. At this point in your life, let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into like the 18-year-old version of you, and you could give that young version a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life up to this point. What advice
Mm.
would you impart on your young version?
I would say that I would give him a hug. And then I would say uh, that you really have to explore your potential, and that uh, finding inspiration is about, or discovering inspiration is about sort of manifesting an interest in the first place. Like, so learning. Oh, so I would say, um, so you, I don't know, find all the constituents living in your potential.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So let me ask you this. The one thing I know growing up in Kansas City as a baseball fan, there was a baseball player named Jim Eisenreich, and he had Tourette's, and he was the first person that I was ever aware of. And it was a real learning curve.
Wow.
And I remember he used to give interviews and he had it under control. I don't know exactly what he did. It never, I guess it never goes away. It's something you just have to
Hmm.
you control. And he got under like his thing was, which is weird, as a baseball player, he had an immense fear of large gatherings of people and somehow he got over it.
Hmm.
And I'm curious with you and how it works. How do you deal with it? How do you tame it? How does it become something that is manageable, or how does that work for you?
It's honestly, it becomes rather unmanageable sometimes. Sometimes the context of my life largely dictates its severity of Shakespeare. And so if I feel secure, I'm gonna have them less. Um, but Shakespeare, I often, for me, it's manifested in a very violent way. So, um, because of the way I grew up, my brain has like formed this very stubborn uh, strategy of self-mutilation being like the solution for everything. Anytime you feel shame, you need to be beaten. And so I poke my own eyes out. Um, I jab myself in the throat. I punch myself in the face. I've like given myself black eyes and bloody lips. Shakespeare. And my right hand is is aches a lot because I've hit it, punched things on so many times that and for like 3 months I lost use of my thumb uh because of I hit something so hard that it messed up a tendon on the back of my hand. And so I can't really bend it a whole lot anymore,
Yeah,
uh, and use it really at all very much. Uh, yeah, it's quite painful. And in public it can be uh, distressing
yeah,
because in America, for example, there's a lot of guns. It's a worrisome situation for
yeah,
someone like me who startles people a lot.
yeah,
Like for example, I was at a grocery store the other day and I was picking out a celery thing and I had a yelling tick, so I yelled really loud and everybody within like 50 feet of me, which was like about 100 people, just stopped and looked.
yeah,
Yeah, it was crazy.
yeah.
Um,
Well, you'd mentioned job training. My son's 19 and he's on the spectrum,
Shakespeare,
and he
Shakespeare,
has to have job coaching, so I understand exactly what you're talking about. It's
Shakespeare,
rough.
Shakespeare,
And
Shakespeare,
it's and just it's really all about just the world accepting you for who you are. And
Shakespeare,
we
Shakespeare.
tend to live in a more judgmental world as
Hmm.
time marches on than anything else. It's amazing. But as a parent, I've gotten to a point where I've literally woven in blinders into my world so much that I just let it go. I can't play into people that don't have any idea what's up, you know?
Yeah, I think that, but I actually am seeing a rising sentiment of like uh rebellious optimism,
Yeah.
because some people are just like I think that a lot of people are trying to assess like the way they feel about other humans, and I think that we're all tired of saying we humans suck.
Yeah.
And I think because I'm exhausted by it, like I it's not fun. It's not fun to hear that sort of thing. And also to sympathize with it is even worse. You're like, yeah, it is. It's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see the reverse happening, and I think that that is where it's gonna start moving
Yeah.
again. Like we're gonna be, and I think that people are seeing things with more nuance because the notion that you can get canceled now, I think, is occurring to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you can do that. You don't have to be famous to be canceled, right? You could just be a regular person.
Yep. Absolutely.
Um, and I just I think I know it's funny like to ever sympathize with someone like as a celebrity, but I mean just it's wild. It's wild. It's a wild thing to try to be famous or to because but I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic, truly. I think people are seeing more nuance in life,
Yeah.
and that's important.
I think so too. I think you're right. I think there's a level of acceptance that's different now. There's a level of empathy, and maybe
Hmm.
COVID had something to do with that. But at the end of the day, everyone around you has an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, all of the fans that buy your book, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, I think that I'm someone that, despite everything, uh, tries really hard to be a better person every day, and that that's it. That's really it. And and probably like Hemingway said that there's nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self.
Yeah.
And so that's a healthy philosophy to live by, assuming that you have good judgment that informs like what you're doing
Yeah.
is good,
Yeah.
in the sense that it's humanitarian. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right on. So if anyone wants to pick up the book, they want to reach out to you, learn more about your world, where's the best place to go?
Shakespeare. Well, you can find my book on Kristof Morrow. You can find the book on Shakespeare on Amazon. And then you can. I'm mostly most of my followers. I have like 5,300 followers or something on TikTok, and that's where my most of my everyone is. And I'd use Instagram also, but I will answer no matter what or talk, whatever. If you have any, yeah.
Cool, man. Kristof,
Shakespeare,
this has been great. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Best
Shakespeare,
of luck with everything.
yeah, Shakespeare. Thank you.